Hey, Zach,
we can't hear you. We can see you.
Can't hear you.
Zach?
Wave. You have to read lips.
The most technically qualified of our group.
What could that be?
I know the first time I logged in, I got no audio, and then the second time I did, I got it.
So one more try.
No, he's on.
And he's off. He's got a cool chair.
He's got the serious chair for.
Yeah, he must do this a lot. Yep. Can you tell him outside?
It went off again.
It's wonderful, Joanne.
With the motorcycles in the background? Can you hear them?
Can't see.
You can't see me?
Not the motorcycles.
No, no, because they were just rumbling by. I didn't know if you could hear them.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Zach,
How's
we
that?
can hear you.
Oh,
Where
okay.
are you?
But we
Third
can't
time's
see.
the charm.
We
They
Where's
can't
your
see.
face?
How about now?
Yeah,
Yay!
there
There you are.
Oh, third time's the charm.
See?
I do not like this program. Sorry about that, folks.
Okay.
Zach, we will try to find a way to move off of this one as well in the future.
Yeah, I've done like a million Zoom meetings and other platforms, but this one's just wonky.
Zoom is so easy.
Yeah.
Zoom's good. Is this go to meeting? Yeah. This is go to webinar. Yeah.
All right, sorry to keep you guys waiting. I mean, I was on the meeting like 5 minutes before and I could see you all, but I couldn't get the thing to let me in.
We
So I
sabotaged
feel
it,
your
so
pain,
you'd be
Stephanie.
late.
I think you and Joanne were both in this play. I think it just rotates, I guess. Amongst us. All right, so welcome everyone. If you're watching this Board of Health meeting remotely, this is our Board of Health meeting for June 8th, 2020. It's 6 p.m. at night, so or it's 6:08 actually. So if you're watching live right now and you would like to join us by asking questions or make comments, you can do that by raising your hand virtually. We will call on you. There should be some appropriate times to do that. For instance, we're going to have a call to order right now with an open forum. So if anyone has any questions or comments, now is a great time to do that. So the way you can do that on GoToWebinar is down in the, usually it's on the right, there's a section that says questions, and there's also a place where you can put up your virtual hand. It looks like a little red hand, and that'll raise your hand so that Jeff can see that you're raising your hand. And if you have any questions during the meeting, just raise your hand and we will try and get to it. All right, so our first agenda item is a call to order and our open forum. So if you have any questions, now is the time to do that. And if you're watching at home on cable TV, or if this is a rebroadcast, then of course you won't be able to do that. All right, I don't see anything. Do you, Jeff? Do you see any questions or raised hands?
I do not.
Okay. So our next, and is anything open forum wise that any members want to talk about? No, okay. Our next agenda item then is a joint meeting between the Parks and Recreations Commission to discuss town beaches and the summer programming with regard to COVID-19. And I think we have James Duane, the Director of Parks and Rec, with us. Maybe.
You do. Zach,
You do.
thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to give you a brief overview of the memo that I sent, and then, kind of give you a little bit of information about where we're at, and then ask for the Board of Health to provide feedback, questions, or concerns so that we can continue to do our planning.
Great, that would be very helpful. Yeah, so everyone in your packet, there should be James's letter dated 6/4/20. And yeah, feel free to summarize that or go over it with us.
Sure.
Excuse me, Zach.
Mhm.
Would you like a couple of us to drop out so James can come on screen?
No, you don't need to see me.
This is the equivalent of James being at the back of the room.
I am in the office, actually, so.
It's up to you, James, if you're comfortable doing it audio only, or if you'd like to join us on screen, that's fine too.
At your pleasure, Mr. Chair, or the board, whatever you would desire.
Jeff, so I'm assuming we're limited to 6 video streams.
Unfortunately, that's the one drawback to this platform, but it's the only one I have that I know that I can get his document on. So I had to make a choice between the document or the platform, and that's kind of where we were at today.
Okay. I'll hide my video and then come on.
All right, thanks, Sue.
Wait, how do I do that?
Turn the little camera button on.
There we go. Can you still hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
we can hear you.
There we go. All
Great,
I'll do
James
the
able to join us. Thanks, James.
No problem.
We lost Michelle.
I'm still here, just invisible.
Wouldn't that be nice to do at all meetings if we could just hit the invisible button? I think more people will run for office, I think.
So as you mentioned, I did provide a memo for the packet, and the genesis of this entire thing is obviously the current COVID-19 pandemic and a request from the town manager that we embark on some program planning early enough in the process that we'd have some pretty solid outline by the time we got to the point where we could actually potentially run programming. So as part of that planning process, we were asked to gain some insight and conversation with the Parks and Recreation Commission, as well as to have a discussion with the Board of Health, so that I can then give an update to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow night on the 9th. The memo that I provided for you really is pretty much the outline in terms of where we're at and what we're proposing to do. The program that we outlined in the memo was voted and supported by the Parks and Recreation Commission after discussion at their 6/1/20 meeting. There was a vote of 4-0-0 to support continued programming, with the caveat that we all knew that the guidance could change very dramatically at any given time, and that there was going to be additional input from the Board of Health and the Board of Selectmen to help finalize the decision. With that being said, we are angling towards running a day-long summer program that provides for parents to have full day coverage for children as we start to navigate this whole get back to work, reopen the economy. And in order to support what we thought was good planning, we released a survey to the community, asking them, a very simple 4-question survey, asking them for various types of programming that they may like to see. And it came back unanimous, I shouldn't say unanimous, came back 40+% of the 300 respondents indicating that they preferred a program that provided day-long coverage and provided flexibility of attending between 1 and 5 days a week so that they could plan accordingly for work and office and home. With that being said, we started to look at what we thought the limitations to programming would be. And we typically run our recreation summer programming out of 2 locations, East Boston Camps or the Nabnasset School. We weren't sure what the Nabnasset School situation would be, so we communicated with the superintendent, and he said that they would be as helpful as they could be with providing that space to us, but at the time we had asked formally, they weren't sure because they didn't know what the future guidance was going to be. So we then started working with the Conservation Commission to gain some additional access to East Boston Camp so that we'd have some additional outside space as well as some additional inside space to accommodate our programming. The Conservation Commission granted us access to additional buildings on their property, which gives us a phenomenal amount of outside space as well as indoor space to accommodate programming. And now we've gone to work on laying out some staff schedules that will hopefully accommodate up to 60 participants in the new set of guidelines that have been released by the state. Those guidelines, as you know, were updated periodically and continue to be updated right up until I guess this past weekend or even today, there was some clarification provided. And I don't know that any of us really have had a chance to digest that yet. But I do know that as we've gone through this planning, we've been working very closely with Jeff and with Ray. They've been exceptionally helpful. They've been very willing and giving of their time and interpretations. And, our goal is to continue to work with them closely enough that we align whatever it is that we propose to do for a summer program with whatever the requirements are for the state and obviously local Board of Health. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions or ask for comments or concerns from, the Board of Health. Mr. Chair, as you're aware, there are members of the Park and Recreation Commission here tonight. So if you wanted to interact with them or they had comments or questions at your meeting, but I wanted you to know that they were here to share information as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, maybe we could introduce the members of the Parks and Rec that are with us tonight.
I'd be happy to do that, Jeff, if that works for you.
That's perfectly fine. I was going to ask you if you wanted to do that.
So with me tonight is the chair of our Park and Rec Commission, Christy Bates, the vice chair of the Park and Rec Commission, Chris Barrett, and I believe two other members. I know that Lauren Coffey and Michael Furman are with us, and I don't know if I think that's it for the Parks and Recreation Commission. And I also have with us this evening, Assistant Director of Recreation, Michelle Collette, who handles and oversees all of our after school and summer recreation programming.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Yeah, so if any of you on the meeting tonight have questions, and feel free to, I guess, so Jeff, can they do an audio question if they want to unmute their mic, or are they limited to something?
I put them all as panelists, so all of them should actually be able to speak freely. I don't think I have to turn anybody off.
Okay, great. So yeah, so it should be that you can just click on and off your microphone if you want to join in, or you have a question or a comment. Feel free during this discussion. I know it's not like a regular meeting, so it's not interrupting at all to voice your thoughts during the meeting.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say hello. Hi, Joanne. It's Michelle.
I hear you.
All right, I'm muting myself now.
Hi, Michelle. Good to hear you.
I have a few questions and concerns.
Sure. So
I'm just curious for a few things, James, about medical. So what are you doing for medical staff? Are you going to have a nurse there? What are your plans for that? I'll throw out a few of my concerns when I was thinking about it. What is medical staffing going to look like? And what kind of plans have you put into place for if somebody ends up getting sick with COVID, whether it be a staff member or a camper? So, what kind of plans have you guys put into place for all of that? I can't hear you.
I'll do that at least 2 or 3 times tonight. Sorry.
James, can I just say one thing too? I should say to you, I am all for getting everything back. You have to know I am incredibly supportive of the return to normalcy, because I've been so worried about mental health and the isolation, desolation. I am really, really excited about getting back, for families and children. But obviously we got to think through all the possibilities. So I'm just wondering what you guys have thought through in terms of that.
Sure. First and foremost, I appreciate the concern, and that's not me just trying to say the right thing. As we've gone through this process, I've expressed to my board, I've expressed to Jody, I've expressed to my staff, and to Jeff, we want to do this. This is what we do. At the core of what we do for a living, we want these programs and these operations to run. But, there are some concerns. There are some unknowns. And over the last 4 or 5 days, those unknowns have really been narrowed a little bit more, but there are still unknowns. I think we've done a lot of soul searching and a lot of conversation and come to a pretty good outline. But, again, we're kind of in uncharted territory here, and our ability to execute, I think, is going to be a direct result of taking a very measured approach, implementing something that's meaningful, and then being able to observe it and see if the decisions that we all made actually play out in the real world, because these are kids and workers and people's lives and health at stake. And, none of us want to take that lightly. So thank you for your concern. And that's exactly why we're here tonight. With regards to what we've done in terms of planning for medical. So the summer recreation program and the licensed camp in the state of Massachusetts are two different things. So a summer recreation program, which is what we have always run, has a little bit of a different set of guidelines than a licensed camp. And we have been working with Jeff and having questions and answers with the state to try to make sure we understand what this guidance means and what the specifics of the guidance mean as far as an application to a municipal recreation program. As of right now, based on some exchange with the state, it seems like we are not required to have a nurse on site for our program, but we are required to have people that have some form of training. All of my staff that run our after-school programming and our summer programming are all CPR and first aid certified and have been doing, recreational group programming for years under the same guidelines that we are operating, or we feel like we can operate under now. That's subject to change. It's subject to further interpretation, and we continue to work with Jeff and Ray and the state to make sure we understand exactly what's needed. With regards to our plan for if a camper or staff were to get sick, part of the guidance document that came out indicates that we have to have a isolation area available to us. Up at East Boston camps, there's actually an infirmary cabin that has a main room with a private bathroom, as well as 3 separate isolation rooms that you can put anybody that may come down and exhibit symptoms. You can put them in any one of those 3 rooms to be able to keep them isolated until you can have them transported or arrangements made. They can transport themselves if it's a staff member, or somebody picks them up if it's a parent or a staff member. I don't know if that answers your question wholly, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
Well, yeah, but I would think though that everything that you're planning to do should be like should be explicitly written out. You know what I mean? To me, that information, if we're going to be going public and like if you're going to go in front of the select board, I think you should have more information in this memo about what your plans are in the event of, and remember, the big thing about close contacts is if you're with somebody for more than 15 minutes, you become you're a close contact. So think about kids at a camp or counselors, that could be a lot of kids being put into quarantine. And again, we have to be prepared for the worst case scenario. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
I personally would rather see more written out than what you currently have in the memo that you sent to us. But that's my opinion.
Sue, I do believe they're going to have that written out, but every piece and every portion of that is actually still changing daily. Even right down to there's rumors that when kids were going to be checked in, the guidance when kids were going to be checked in as much as a week ago was going to require a temperature check coming into the camp or program. And that is, we're aware of, has already changed. Okay. And we should be hearing about that tomorrow. So writing out those very specific pieces is, which I believe Jim is doing and Michelle are doing currently, but until all of that guidance is actually in place, they can go as far as what they have in front of them. The newest guidance came out today, the 8th, which most of us haven't even fully read yet.
Okay. I'm just playing the devil's advocate before you go in front of the select board. As a health, as a board of health, we have to be considering those things. And I would hate for somebody on the select board to be raising that question and us not to have raised it. So I just need to think, I want to be very forthcoming that I am incredibly supportive of this, but I want to just make sure that we're doing our due diligence and making sure everything's in place. And I totally understand that things keep changing. That's definitely the way it is. So.
We've also brought Gail in on some of these conversations with the mental health and medical piece.
Okay.
Joanne, you had a question?
So, yeah, I do have a question, but also to clarify too, within the camp guidance, it from the state EEA, it specifically says that you need two healthcare supervisors. So these, you know, and I'm not sure on our local regs, but if they're not there, they should be. Specifically to take care of that person or persons who may become ill during the camp day, because you have to have a healthcare supervisor, a designated healthcare supervisor to run your program. And if that person is taking care of somebody else, you still need a healthcare supervisor. So there's a requirement to have two people designated. You know, the more the merrier that have first aid CPR. Every counselor should have first aid CPR, but the healthcare supervisor needs to be designated and trained by the healthcare consultant. I would like, and you know, if it's a municipal program, and I know you don't have to abide by all the camp regulations, but I would like to see that in place. And it's, you know, I think right now for the camp guidelines, there are some things that are in flux, but everything is pretty well laid out. So as long as you're following the guidelines as written, you know, again, with the caveat, as you said, as things change, so be it, it can change. But, you know, I was told today on a call, I told Jeff that, you know, the temperature requirement is being removed. I'm on a different call, on a big cities call on Mondays. And I'm assuming it's going to be announced at the DPH call, the all community call tomorrow. So that's a good thing. I don't know how you are ever going to take every child's temperature every day and record it and ever get to camp. But it doesn't mean that the screening protocols are gone. So that is one burden that'll be removed. But you know, I would like to see that there's two people designated at all times whenever you're in operation. That's my one thing. But the other thing I wanted to ask was, you did mention that there's going to be participants. Now, is that 60 in total or 60 at each facility?
So we are at 60 total. We are proposing to run only one location this summer. And the reason we're proposing that is because as we started to look at the planning, I didn't see how I could possibly spread my staffing resources across two locations and still have any type of flexibility or capacity to meet whatever the regulations were that were coming out. Normally we would run at two locations and we'd take, you know, a number of kids up, probably 40, 50, 60 at each location. There's just no way for us to be able to do that this year with the guidance that's coming out and the expectations that are going to be placed on staff. So we pulled back to one location.
East Boston Camp?
East Boston Camp, yep. A combination of the buildings that are at the upper camp, it's referred to as the boys camp, where Marcus Lewis has typically run his program, as well as they refer to as the day camp, which is where we have typically run our program. So we'll be using a combination of inside and outside spaces.
Okay. So in terms of the inside spaces, the one thing that seems to be a stumbling block for a lot of camps is, you know, that indoor space during inclement weather. Have you figured out that you have enough indoor space for all 60 kids with proper social distancing and all the rest?
So we have figured out, we went up and we measured several buildings, and we have the square footage, conservative square footage. Depending on where you read in the guidance and how you interpret it, again, it's a number, it's another number that there's some, you know, interpretation there. It says for emergency purposes, everyone needs 30 square feet. But then it says 42 square feet and ideally 144 square feet per child. So we've taken some measurements, and again, these are all things that as the guidance came out and as we started to do our planning, the number of kids that we can take is going to be determined by a number of variables that we have to kind of play with them in a scenario. The schedule, the number of kids, the available inside space, what the guidance says, and how all of that comes together. We capped it at 40 to 60 several weeks ago, probably 4 or 5 weeks ago when we first started talking about it. And, we still think that 40 is reasonable. We think that 60 is probably the outside end of the spectrum in terms of the upside, the upset amount that we could handle. We have no idea what to expect from a registration standpoint either, but.
Yeah, I think the inclement weather, is because it's I think the assumption is, this is something it's not planned for, and you need to get the kids out of where, the outside very quickly so that the space is small. So as opposed to running a program in a building where they'd be there all the time, then you have to have more space.
And we anticipate, minus foul weather or some type of an emergency, that's why we chose the East Boston Camps location, if the conservation allowed us to, because our intent is to run the majority of that programming outside and utilize the bigger of the buildings up there for indoor recreation activities, because there's such a capacity to social distance when you're talking about groups of 10 children. If you were rotating them through on a day like today and you wanted to do an indoor activity, we would have no challenge to accommodate 10 kids inside the recreation hall up there or inside the mess hall up there. But if it came to inclement weather or an emergency situation, those same facilities with a reduced guidance, whether it's 42 or 30 square feet, we can house far more kids than we anticipate being able to take in the program from a registration standpoint.
So you'll be running even in foul weather? Are you going to be canceling if you know that it's going to rain, or are you just going to hold it and then use that indoor space?
It's one of the things that we still have to work out, is whether or not we're going to be able to cancel for weather or whether we're going to plan to run on indoor space. And part of our conversations to come to these decisions, and again, this is, it's coming at us in real time. We're on the Mass Rec and Park calls daily right now to make sure that we're aligning ourselves with what the surrounding towns are either getting for interpretation or doing for activities or planning for operations. And it's kind of a 50-50 split right now. Some places are just canceling altogether. And some places are taking the approach of canceling if there's any inclement weather. And we are trying to figure out whether or not our space allows us to do both. Because from a planning standpoint, when you start to look at the financial impacts of having to cancel for bad weather, or what it does to the parents who are looking for that service, it becomes a very difficult proposition to plan this whole thing and then realize that maybe 1 or 2 days a week or 1 day a week for 8 weeks, you may not be running at all. It is the planning and the expense to prepare for that worth the trade-off of not being able to run? Mm-hmm. I don't have the answers to some of those questions. I got to be honest with you, right? Like, that's a gut feeling. It's kind of a ongoing discussion for the leadership in the town, and ultimately we've got to come to those answers.
James, has there been discussion to use another location for days that there's inclement weather? So like, if you know that tomorrow is going to be raining, to hold it at, say Stony Brook Middle School or someplace that has big enough area for the kids to do activities indoors?
There hasn't been, and it was one of the things we thought about from a logistics standpoint, to be able to communicate with the parents effectively, get them to make the adjustment to make sure they show up, and do that potentially on a moment's notice or a day's notice. It would be challenging. We would end up with a number of participants that got brought to the wrong spot, or, and then there was the flip side of that, which is the schools and us accessing the schools and what that means for additional cleaning and logistics in terms of planning for 2 locations. It just became a little bit overwhelming for us to try to make that a reality.
How many
Stephanie?
of the buildings then are you able to use up at East Boston Camps?
I apologize, Stephanie. I couldn't hear what you said.
How many of the buildings then are you able to use up at East Boston camps?
So the Conservation Commission was very generous and very gracious with us. I had originally asked them for access to the mess hall and the recreation hall and the bathrooms at the top of the camp, because all of those also provide good accessibility in terms of handicap accessibility. And then I asked them if they could hold an asterisk on that ask, because there might be a couple of other buildings up there that we'd like to use depending on how these numbers shook out for indoor and outdoor and capacity for enrollment. And they said yes, they were very agreeable to that. Michelle had a meeting with Carol Gumbart up there at the end of last week, and at that point mentioned the infirmary and potentially a couple of the other buildings, and she didn't seem to think it was a problem. So I know, I guess at a minimum, I know that we can use the infirmary, the rec hall, the mess hall, and the bathrooms, and probably 2 or 3 of the other smaller cabins.
Can you tell me what dates you're looking at?
So right now, we were targeting June 29th as the day to start our operation. And again, that was a date that we picked back when the governor indicated the initial release of his 4 phases, and that it would be a minimum of 3 weeks in between. I just did some math backing into, okay, if it starts today and we go 3 weeks to phase 2, what's that date? And then 3 weeks to phase 2, what's that date? And we looked at the 3rd phase possibly being when recreation camps would be allowed, so we targeted the 29th. Part of targeting the 29th is also that school's still in session right now. So we wouldn't have access to a lot of the employees that we would typically have, as well as the kids technically are still in school. So we targeted the 29th of June, and that lines up with when our normal summer programs would start.
And
We're looking at the 21st, I think it was the 21st. It's whatever that Friday is. I think it's the 21st of August.
You said
Roughly
23rd.
8 weeks.
Yeah.
23rd, okay. The beaches and the camps had a couple of different dates by a couple of days, but
Oh,
you know. I think we would end the summer program on that Friday of the 3rd week, and we would end the beaches on the Sunday of the 3rd week.
oh, gotcha. Okay.
In your discussions with the rest of the commission and with the schools, did you go down the road of thinking about a secondary location for inclement weather? And the reason I just keep bringing it up is, you can have those awful weeks in the summer where you get, a few days of thunderstorms or a few days of rain. And I'd hate to think that you were basically, in a location that you didn't really want to be in for those days, where the kids couldn't really, do what you had hoped they could do. Whereas if they were in a bigger building and could still do some of those sports, like in a gym or something. So is it the kind of thing where you could locate to a gym or something and still be able to continue your operations on inclement days?
We didn't explore that. I'm happy to at least have the conversations, but again, from a logistics standpoint and a notification standpoint and an operating standpoint, it just, timing wise, it didn't seem like we were going to have the time that we would need to be able to A, set that up, and then B, communicate that in real time to parents when you have the flexibility of registering for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 days a week. It leaves a lot of potential misinterpretation, and it leads to frustration as well on the part of the parents and the kids.
Okay.
But I'm happy to have that conversation. The school department did say that they would keep the NAB school open for us as a potential alternative. But I can also tell you that
That's a small space, though.
it dramatically changes how we approach things. So one of the things that we really like about East Boston camps is the proximity of diverse and open outside exercise, right? In addition to the fact that there are some conditions around operations for swimming and beaches, access to beaches, where East Boston Camps has its own dedicated beach right there at the facility, in addition to paths and wide open spaces. Again, the inclement weather, it's part of the reason why we're looking at 40 to 60 participants and using a number of buildings, including the lower camp and the upper camp, so that hopefully if we have 40 or 50 kids, that we aren't challenged by putting them in a space that's, minimum 30 square feet, and that's what we're giving them for the day. I also think that, some of that's going to be up to the parents too. If they want to register their children for the program, I think there's a component of the parents need to understand that there are some limitations, and if it's a foul weather day, I'm not so sure that a lot of parents would be putting their child into the program for that day. But, that, again, that's yet to be seen.
No, you're right. You could have just a limited number of kids that show up that day. That's a good point.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from board members, or any other questions from the commission that would like to chime in? Feel free to. I know that Jeff is monitoring your virtual hands, and if you have any questions. And James, I would just like to say, thank you to you and your commission for all the hard work. I know how hard it must be to plan this at all, knowing that, it's continually a moving target and changing all the time. And so you're trying to come up with the best plans for the kids to keep them safe and to give them a fun summer. But at the same time, you have to keep, wondering what's going to change by the 29th. Because that is a long way away, and that is the beginning of the third phase. So, there's definitely going to be some changes.
We thought that as we started to do this, when we started looking at it several weeks ago, if you had asked me at that point what the reality of this happening was, I would have honestly said, I don't know that we could actually do this. Based on where we were as a society and what was being asked of us as a society, I don't think there was any reasonable way we could take kids, put them in a program, keep them distanced, make it meaningful, charge a fee, and accommodate whatever it was that was coming. As things have come out, and it looks like a lot of people have put a lot of time into these conversations and decisions, and it continues to adjust, I think we get closer and closer and closer to being able to do something that's meaningful, that's safe, that's financially feasible and operationally feasible. And again, we're not 100% there yet either. There's a whole host of things that could happen in the next 3 or 4 days that could change the number from 40 to 20, or could eliminate our ability to do this altogether. But, cautiously optimistic and keep making the best decisions we can. It's kind of where I'm at.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So what are the ages of your campers? Because another stumbling block for a lot of people that I've spoken to is the ages. So that they've cut out their smaller or younger kids with the choose of.
In here, it says 6 to 13 in the month.
Oh, see, I don't have it in front of me. So, but all right. So what? So
he's in the memo. He says ages 6 to 13.
Okay, so even with those age groups, again, going back to the wearing of the masks and such, what do you have in terms of access to PPE, having it there on site in case, somebody forgets theirs, it gets dirty, all of that? Do you have that all written up, or is it just easier to go by the guidance and just say, we're going to follow the guidance?
We're doing both, actually. I started the conversation with Paul Fox, who's the director of facilities for the town and the school in Westford. And Jody had put him in charge of kind of a centralized purchasing operation for all of the PPE associated with operations. I've been communicating with him for several weeks now. As a matter of fact, I just texted with him right before this meeting and said to him, hang on, let me pull this up. I said, Paul, would you tell me I'm crazy if after what we've done for calculations and thinking that we probably are going to need somewhere in the vicinity of 6,000 masks and 8,000 pairs of gloves in order to get through an 8-week program. In addition, and I added on, I said, in addition, there's probably a need for some eye protection, but I'm not sure that we can estimate that the same way we do gloves and masks. They're a little bit less disposable. And he said, no, I don't think that's crazy at all. The state just came out with recommendations. And if I recall correctly, it's 1 mask a week per student and 1 per day for teacher. So roughly 5,000 a week for students and 2,500 a week for teachers.
What, a week?
So, right, so that's not what my estimates are. My estimates that I gave him of 6,000 masks and 8,000 pairs of gloves are geared more towards, let's make sure that we have enough to get us started, and we plan that each kid each day may need a mask, right? And let's conservatively plan that. And if we get 4 weeks into the program and it's been 5 kids a day instead of 40 kids a day, we know we have enough on hand to get us through several remaining weeks. But I've done some calculations and put together some numbers just based on very conservative approach, because listen, if we don't use them this summer, we're going to use them in the fall, or we're going to use them next summer. So, you know.
But I think, you know, the burden shouldn't really be on the town. We should have things available, but, you know, the kids should be coming with some kind of a face covering and an extra or 2 every day. It's, you know, I don't know that it's our burden. We should, like I said, you should have some on hand in case, but that should be, you know, one of those things that the parent sends. And, you know, also with the understanding that if things do shift and we have to go back a few steps, that, you know, something like this would, you know, this kind of a programming may be canceled, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely on both accounts. I think that the goal of estimating heavy was so that we place an initial order that gets us into the program. Our expectation and our communication with parents who register for this is going to be that they are expected to supply their child with appropriate PPE, send them to the program with spare PPE. But we also know the reality of 6, 7, and 8-year-olds as well as staff. You know, you're going to go in, you're going to do something, you're going to touch your mask, or it's going to fall off, or it's going to break. And it's not okay to not be over-prepared when it comes to PPE for this type of a setting. So, yes, I agree with you. We are going to put that burden on the parents, but we also need to plan accordingly.
Good. You've put a ton of thought into this, so thank you.
My head is still spinning, and we're doing the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
Thank Jeff, because he takes 40 calls a day from me asking him, what about this one? What about that one?
It's all going to be worth it if the kids get to finally get some playtime and some, you know, enjoying each other's company. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That's the goal. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any comments or questions from commissioners who are on the call? Anything that they would like to mention or say? Feel free to chime in and just hit your mute button if you would. Any other questions or comments from our board members? Just please let me know.
Hi, Zach. This is Christy Bates.
Oh, hi.
Thanks for having us. I just have a clarification question. Joanne brought up that she thought that 2 health counselors should be on staff. But can you hear me? 2 health counselors for the camp. And Jim pointed out that we don't have them right now. So I just want to confirm, is that your recommendation from the Board of Health that we need to hire those staff members in order to continue with this camp?
That's in the guidance.
But that's for camps. And if
Right.
It's for camps. Yes. So, but that's in the guidance for camps. So I'd like to see that put in place, that you have, you know, adequate healthcare supervisors. Sue had brought up the whole issue about medical staffing. And I think at a minimum, you need to have, you know, 2 people designated so that it aligns with the guidance for camps.
So Jim, as you pointed out, that's not something that we've done in the past, correct? Because this is a summer recreation program.
You are correct, Christy. That's not something we've been held accountable to in the past. And, you know, if that's the requirement and that's what the local Board of Health thinks is appropriate, I'm all for the appropriate measures of public safety. I will say that, you know, from an expense or a staffing standpoint, I may not have those resources available to me either by the 29th or at all. I don't know, to be able to do that. And if that's the case, that's okay too. I mean, this is not plow forward at all expense and, you know, caution be damned at all. If that's the requirement, then, or the expectation, then we'll do our best to meet it. And if we can, we will. And if we can't, it may be one of those things that just changes our course a little bit. But you know.
So the healthcare supervisor under the camp regulations isn't a registered nurse.
Right.
It has to be someone, over a certain age with first aid CPR that's trained by someone, typically the healthcare consultant who would be a prescribing a Massachusetts prescriber, doctor, nurse practitioner, on signs and symptoms, on the medications, on, things that might come up at camp. So, it's not that you have to go out and hire 2 RNs for the summer, but this has to, if you look at the camp regulations, it'll explain to you exactly what the healthcare supervisor's roles are. And these are people that are there to take care of sick and injured children and staff. And that's what I'm getting at.
So my
Sorry.
understanding is that it's not a camp, it falls under a summer recreation municipal
Yeah.
program.
Yes, but if you read the guidance, municipal programs are also subject to the same guidance. It's all in the first paragraph.
So my one question I would have there is if there are lifeguards on staff throughout the day for the program and there were 2 of them, would they meet that requirement?
No, they have to be designated healthcare supervisors. So again, if you read the guidance, it says that municipal programs are also subject to the guidance. And it says 2 healthcare supervisors.
Right, but if they already had that, they could simply close the beach
They're
if needed.
Well, they'd have to close the beach.
Right.
Because you
If
can't
they
have the
close
beach without lifeguards. So the point is, find 2 of your people and train them.
Right. I was just saying one option might be if there were lifeguards on staff, they could close a beach and then function in that capacity where they're then that.
Well, yeah, you certainly could, but then you'd have to close the beach. You
So-
can't.
I'd actually like to explore this conversation a little bit more because this is important to me.
Yes,
And absolutely. And I know that, based on what the guidance says and what we've received for some interpretation of that, and then my ability to have a healthcare consultant, which is also defined in the guidance, to be able to train healthcare supervisors. These positions, regardless of how we fill them, right? Who the person is, it's 2 additional positions that we have not discussed having on site at the facility during the entirety of the program, which will change the dynamics a little bit from a financial standpoint, as well as finding people that are trained appropriately, whether it's trained up by a healthcare consultant that I currently don't have, or finding a healthcare consultant that can come in and train them appropriately. It's just, these are just all challenges, which is why we're having these conversations. Let's get it on the table and make sure we all know what the decision points are so that we can say yes or no at each turn.
So here's what I will do with Jim. We'll take that piece of the guidance and we'll pull it apart and see what we can do to fill that and make sure we can do it. Something we'll work on this week.
Okay.
Thank you, Joanne, and I hope that nothing I've said has offended either of you, because I appreciate that input.
No. I think Sue feels the same way. I work in another place. We're struggling with this, and it's a municipal program. That's why I know that it's under the same guidance. And I think we both want a program for the summer for the kids, and it's just got to be safe. And from my standpoint, what I do all day long with the tracing and all that, I don't want to see anything going backwards. So, we want to make sure that we can let the kids have some fun and keep them safe at the same time.
Great. Well, it sounds like James and Jeff will work together on as things keep evolving and keep going forward to keep up with the latest information so that they can hopefully get this to open this summer. Because between now and June 29th, it seems like it's around the corner, but it's still a long time in terms of what's going to be changing in the state. So thank you, Jeff, for working with James on that. I appreciate it. Any other questions or comments from the board or from commissioners before we move on to our next topic? Jeff, do you need anything further from the board?
On this subject, no. I'll just work with Jim on getting the healthcare consultant piece ironed out. I do seem to remember we did talk about 2 at one point, Jim, as we're talking about it. So we'll just make sure that they're the right people and trained, and we'll look to see what our options are to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the help. And, you know, happy to be as compliant as we need to be, or something other, you know. It's not, this is great. This is exactly why we're having this conversation. And I appreciate that. I am going to the board tomorrow night, to the select board. I will share with them everything that I've shared with you guys. And I will identify for them that there are still some unknowns, which I was going to say to them anyway. And this is why I'm with the Park and Rec Commission and the Health Board before I'm with the Board of Selectmen, so that they can make as informed a decision as possible. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
and I speak
you,
for myself,
James,
you
for
can
all
just
your
say
work.
that we're behind you, so I think, I mean, can't speak for me.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking for myself as well, I mean, I hope that the select board knows tomorrow night that we want everything to work out in your favor so that you guys can open, because it's such an important role.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just like to tell everybody that is on the Parks and Rec Commission, thanks for coming. If you want to listen to our presentation on the septic regulation, you're welcome to stay, but I don't necessarily think you need to if you don't want to.
Thank you for having us. This is Christy Bates. Have a good night, everybody.
You too.
Right.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
All right, our next agenda item is the approval of minutes from April 27th, 2020. I don't know if I saw them in the packet or not. Did you guys see them in the packet?
No, they're not.
Okay, do you guys want to just postpone that to an upcoming meeting?
Yes.
Zach, I just want to give a brief explanation to the board on why they're not there.
Sure.
Our minute taker had a death in the family, and there was a couple of parts of the minutes that I was working on, and I just did not see the need to pressure those while that was going on. And I already had it on the agenda. I just chose not to pull it off, and I figured we could table it. So
Yep.
I apologize for not having those ready to go.
Nope, no problem. All right, our next agenda item is a public hearing to amend section 5.6 of the septic regulations to include that a Title V report be included with proposed sewage disposal plans, and to amend section 5.7 to require that under no circumstances will a tank be reused if it is under 200% of the intended design flow. To amend section 6.13 to require 2 paper sets and 1 PDF format for as-built plans with certifications shall be submitted to the health department. And this hearing was posted on May 8th and on May 2nd in the Westford Eagle.
May 22nd.
I'm sorry, May 22nd.
All right, so this is a regulation that we are continually working on and changing as we need to go. We did meet on this regulation back in, I believe, January, February, and Ray, if you remember, did we talk about it in March? I think we did.
We did.
Yeah, and the board did approve all the changes, and the reason why we're all the way out to here is mainly because of COVID, and this would have been typically done a lot sooner. But we needed to make sure in some of our other meetings that we had our proper notification, and it was properly noticed. And we haven't heard anybody look to make any revisions to this. And Ray, I don't know if you've heard from anybody
Nope.
regarding.
Good to go.
So we're good to go. I don't think there's really much else about this unless there's any recap you would like as a board.
I'm kind of sick of talking about it, if I recall.
Me too, Sue. Me too.
Yeah, I think we've talked this one to death. I think.
I think
that
we're all
we've done
good.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments from the board on this one before we move to vote on it? Seeing none. So Jeff, I assume that you need a motion from us to accept the changes to the regulation?
Yes, and I would also like to point out that I made the regulation effective today. The reason why I did is as far as I know, we don't have any cases that would directly affect this. And some of these changes that we're making are pretty basic, like getting a PDF file shouldn't be something somebody needs 30 days on. So the regulation you see in front of you is ready to go right now. So yes, we do need a motion and a second and a vote.
Do I have a motion to accept?
I'll make the motion.
Oh, go ahead. Michelle.
Okay,
can have-
so Michelle's made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Sue seconds. Any further discussion? Those in favor of amending the septic regulations, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is unanimous.
Thank you.
And that ends our public hearing. Thank you for doing all this work.
Thank you, Ray.
God bless you. It's all done. Thank you.
Big few, huh?
Right.
Our next
Made
agenda
Ray's
item
night.
is department updates. A COVID-19 update with regard to the phased reopening plan in Westford.
So I think all of us have watched the news and seen the governor speak on what the phases mean. And right now we are in day one of phase 2. And what we're doing in the department is we're working with planning, with fire, with police, with building, every single day to make sure that restaurants and places can open when they need to open. The biggest challenge was the seating, and some places were already ready to go with seating because it was in place already, and other places have had to put in alternate seating. So some of our local restaurants are still not quite ready to go, but we are hoping by Wednesday that all of them will need everything they need. Ray, do you want to add anything more to the restaurants and the reopening that we're working on?
I think that's just about it. We've worked, as Jeff said, really hard with other departments and meetings and put together an application so that they're all set with their alcohol license, barriers, police, fire, all of that, side work issues. And the selectmen vote on, I believe there's 11 applications for tomorrow night's meeting.
Wait,
Arnie's been out to
did any
inspect
of them
them.
open yet? Did any of the restaurants open outdoors?
One restaurant was serving today, and police, fire, and building department went down and took care of it.
Okay.
So
Do we still have? I'm sorry.
Burton's was open today, and
Okay.
Burton's already has outside seating.
Yeah.
And their outside seating was already included in their alcohol permit, so I believe they're okay to go. Some of the other bigger ones, like the Tiki Bar, are not prepping to open until the end of the month. In fact, when I talked to them on the phone today, I asked them if they had any plans, and they said, yeah, we do, but it will not be till the 30th of the month. So they're just not physically ready to go yet.
I did
And what
see that Paul's Diner and Aviva Trattoria had isolated areas in the parking lot to increase their seating space.
Yeah,
Yes.
Aviva was serving today. They have outdoor seating. They've extended into the parking lot.
And what about Kimball's? What's gonna happen with them?
So Kimball's we've been out there 4 or 5 times in the last week. So they're pretty much operational. We've opened the brand new grill shack,
Oh,
batting cages, spin
Oh,
zone,
wow.
everything comes online this week. So they will be
So-
fully operating.
Everything at Kimball's though, then restaurant wise, people understand they have to sit and be stationary to eat.
Correct. So they've been out with a ruler measuring picnic tables, and we've gone over cleaners and making sure no one's actually contaminating cleaners, that no one gets hurt, safety. Trying to think what else, tents, we've had to go through building. They just introduced today a clam bake family option for folks, where you could make a reservation. They want to open the coffee shop, the retail shop as well, the country store this week.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So they've got programs set for every satellite station on the property.
Now, do they have their big tents up then, or?
They are putting their big tents up so that they're ready. They know that they're not allowed to have any meetings, events, weddings, programming.
Okay, so they're not using it for their seating at all?
They are using it for seating, but that'll be for, again, outdoor dining for the grill shack area, as well as anyone that orders sandwiches in the country store or ice cream.
So do they have some of the sides open instead of closed as usual then?
Correct. So the regulation, excuse me, the governor's order says 50%, which is just the top, and they can have up to 2 sides. We've let them all know that we just want to see a top.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
That's exciting.
Sanitizer, hand washing stations. Yeah, they got signage everywhere. They're, you know, they did a good job.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other updates?
I will give you one other update. I don't have it on the agenda, but the agenda was done by the time we did this. It's, we went out to 540 Groton Road to the Newport Materials plant on Friday. And Ray did pretty much the final inspection on the hazmat. The facility is basically ready to go. They owe us some paperwork, such as, I think one of the last things they needed was the as-built, but the facility is basically ready to run. They're prepared to make asphalt. It's their first project is probably going to be paving their own driveway, where they're going to be just working out their mix. And they told us about a week ago they'd be ready in 3 weeks, but I think they're going to be ready a little faster than that. So the facility, we've got all of our data on our baseline air quality and noise that we did back last year when we thought we were under the impression they were going to open last year. So we've got that data ready to go, and at an appropriate time, once the facility opens up and they kind of they work out their bugs and they get their process, we'll look into doing a second set of data on air quality and noise at that point and see if there's a difference. I just want to make sure I time it right and we don't do something at a time where it's not going to be the most beneficial data. So
And
I'll be
are you
looking.
prepared to respond to complaints from
We
people
are.
who live with noise
Yeah.
monitoring?
Yeah, we are. And I know there's a lot of strong feelings with that particular plant, but I do think we need to let them get up and running and dial it in and adjust from that point and go forward.
If I could just add too, that I want you to be aware that we didn't forget about your tour. There's a few folks from Chelmsford's Health Department that want to attend as well. And because, you know, with all of us, it would be about 10 or 11 people. I just felt that would be a little too overwhelming trying to go through all their paperwork and do their inspection. We want to see them once they start processing mix to hear noise, see what kind of odors, any problems. So they let us know about a week or two from now, they'll be processing, and then we can all go in and, you know, 2 out of 5 of you or whatnot, we can go and tour the building.
Thanks, Ray.
So we didn't
I do
forget
have a
you.
question,
Mhm.
totally unrelated to anything we're discussing. I heard there was some kind of an incident in a quarry over the past couple of days, and I don't have any details, only that fire responded. And does anyone know what happened?
And somebody was transported to Lowell General, I think, too.
I didn't
Whatever
hear.
happened there didn't involve us.
Okay.
Is that Tingsboro or is that Westford actually?
Probably Tingsboro, right?
Yeah, it's right on the line. If it's
Right on the
a
line.
barrel quarry. No.
I did take a drive to Nashua on Saturday, and there were 2 fire trucks blocking the entrance to the quarry as I was headed past.
It was recorded somewhat, at least in the police or fire
Mhm.
law.
That was one thing that kind of went away.
And then, as I was driving back from Nashua, the fire engines were gone, and there were about 10 people toting beach chairs and towels and bags heading up into the quarry.
Oh,
Interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it actually has been a problem that's been gone. I think it's been ongoing.
I do too.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, our piece of the whole sale and that whole thing, but I'm sure there's lots of things going on up there.
So the last information I'll just update what you with is we, Stephanie, we're working with your group, the APHV. See, that acronym I might get right sooner or later. We
The
are,
Academic Public Health Volunteer Corps.
I want them. Somebody's gonna call me
Okay, Joanne, I'll make sure that happens.
like tomorrow.
Wait,
I'm trying to work with you, Miss Lowell, but
if
and
you're
that's
nice to me, I might even help you too, personally.
yes.
Your
Thank you.
staff is outstanding. Stephanie's staff is outstanding. That is going to
It's
work
not my
at Westford. I know. To me, they're yours. So we're going to see how much help they need to give us, and we're going to see how effective they are. But they've got a lot of good plans, and they're willing to do some social media work for us that will take it off of our plates. And we'll see how it works out. I want to make sure that we've got enough for them to do and they're effective and we're not taking away from jobs in house. Right now we're receiving probably anywhere from 2 to 7 complaints a day on somebody doing a gym operation or some other operation people don't feel is right. And what the intent for using this group is to pull it, to draw away some of the general questions that people may have on a reopening and be able to use their document repository to get them documents they might need for their business and address worker complaints if they come in. And we're going to use them on specific days of the week. I think I'm looking at Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays right now that might work best for them. And we're going to give it a trial run and see if it's something that we need and see if it improves the department. And the last thing I'll leave with you is our current COVID numbers in town. We have an active caseload of 4. So we've removed several from our
That's great.
caseload. And I would love to see it stay there. And I'd love to see it go down to 0.
Well, I'm going for an antibody test tomorrow.
Oh,
I made an appointment, $10 through LabCorp, going to North Andover.
Cases we've had in town to date is 139.
I was sick in early February, and my primary said, you probably had it, but get the
Go get
antibody
the antibody
test. It's hard to find, and
No,
even
it's
if you're
not.
positive,
Nope.
it doesn't mean anything because we don't know how long the immunity is going to last.
I know, but at least it's giving us, so, I've been on those calls with the state and Joanne too. Now at least they're saying that, because we had a big jump on June 1st, because now they're saying that those probables are being counted now, which I think they should.
So how do I go about getting the test?
Just go to labcorp.com. Yep. And literally I went online today. I paid $10. I have an appointment tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where do you go?
It's on Sutton Street in North Andover. Not
Okay.
that far, right off of 495. Yeah.
Great. Anything else?
That's all the update I have for today.
Okay.
thank you,
Well,
Jeff, and it was a lot to be keeping on top of all of this.
Yeah.
Jeff and
Thank
Ray,
you.
you guys are doing a great job, and Gail, everybody's doing a great job. So thank you.
Sorry, Ray, not seeing you. I forget everything.
Okay, it's all right.
yes, thank you to everyone. I know this is just, again, you guys are doing fantastic work. Day in, day out, you must be inundated with work and calls. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
When's our
We
next
couldn't-
meeting? Yeah.
You could use a substance abuse coordinator more than ever right now.
Yeah, I know, right?
When's our next meeting?
It will be in
July.
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 Oh, we're gonna have a July one?
So what, I'm guessing it would be Monday, July 6th at 6 p.m.
It would be, I have to look at a calendar here.
It's the second. Isn't it the second Monday? So it would be the 13th?
Oh, second Monday,
The
right, I'm
13th.
sorry. 13th.
So it'll be July 13th, and my hope was to possibly, unless people have vacation plans, to possibly get enough done in July to not have an August meeting.
Did you say
Because I know that-
vacation plans?
Exactly. Who's going anywhere?
Who's going on vacation?
I took a wild shot in the dark. I don't know.
No, you go on
Get a
vacation. and
private
you're
island somewhere?
quarantined for 14 days. Are you going to Ireland?
Oh.
I don't
Going to
know.
relax.
No vacation plans here.
Yeah, backyard.
I'd be happy to see my kids on the back deck for a dinner.
We can still skip August though. I mean, if we don't have anything going on, that's our vacation, right? Vacation from a meeting.
So
All
yeah,
right.
I think we're gonna need to have July, but we'll try to take a reprieve in August.
Yeah,
Right.
July's probably gonna be telling with these phases, so.
I think
Yeah.
that's
Is,
All right.
is everyone doing the mail-in ballots? I sent my votes in, so Zach,
Ooh.
you're good to go.
I know
Oh,
this
yeah.
is an agenda item, but explain how this all works, because all I do is work, so how do we,
But I really have to
out
go.
of the loop,
Can I leave? Can we?
You can
Yeah.
leave, Sam.
You can leave.
Is there a
in the
motion for
meeting,
adjournment?
somebody's gonna explain it to me.
Okay, sorry. I really have to go though.
I'll make the motion
Stephanie
to
has a motion
adjourn.
to adjourn. Is there a second?
Yeah, adjourn,
I'll
yes,
second.
All those in favor? We are adjourned.
yeah,
All right,
aye.
everybody, bye.
Joanne, you can email